Hi, HR Nation. Welcome to the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we interview today's most successful HR executives 5 days a week. Today, we're joined by a special guest. We're joined by Robert Neuhauser, who's the Global Executive Vice President of People and Leadership at Siemens. Robert, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Outstanding weather here in Munich today, so an enjoyable day, I hope.
I would say the same in the UK, but it's the same as 27 degrees, but everyone's complaining. We can't win. They complain when it rains. When it's hot, we also complain because there's no air conditioning anywhere in the UK, so we can't win. Before we jump in, Robert, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself personally, so your personal background and your journey to where you are now in Siemens.
Actually, I started off as a physicist. So I'm a trained physicist, did a PhD in chemistry, went off for becoming an engineer, development engineer, was designing microprocessors in one of the larger semiconductor companies of the world. But then joined Siemens and switched into manufacturing areas where basically ran huge, large-scale manufacturing optimization programs across whole Siemens globally. Typical things happen. I got responsible for one of the largest crisis projects that we at Siemens had at that time, with the task limit damage, basically, which we pretty much managed to do so. And I was also running one of the largest and most successful business units of Siemens, with around about 10,000 employees as a CEO. Before I then took over this job as head of people and leadership, which is kind of unusual, obviously.
You skipped a few steps there, Robert. How did you go from physicist leading the global unit to HR? You used to take me back a few steps of those transitions, how those transitions happened.
As careers typically evolve, it's not that much plannable. Many of those things are just out of curiosity. At the beginning, I was sure I would stay in academia. I would do a great career in physics, chemistry. I spent 2 years at MIT researching on semiconductor nanocrystallites, which is absolutely fascinating, by the way, for anyone who might be interested. I had the feeling I'm missing out if I'm not going to industry, because doing academia is one stuff, doing hardcore business is another. So that was kind of the switch when I went into this. If I'm really honest about myself, this would be an easy answer, but it's not. It was more, I had a feeling I know how to deal with academia, but I was really kind of afraid of industry. It was really not the sense of finally I can make something happen, but rather there's something where I'm afraid of. I don't know whether I would be able to manage it. And that was basically at that time the driving force. And probably this is a driving force throughout my whole career, that I'm loving jumping into things where I'm not sure whether I'm able to do them.
I love that.
So far, most of the times it worked out.
I love that. And I'm exactly the same, by the way. I'm always looking for that next thing to jump into, to challenge myself. And there's a reason why you've been successful, is because you jump into those opportunities. So where did the transition go from managing that business unit to HR?
This was one of the few steps where actually I was not driving them, but someone else just jumped in. So I got asked by our board whether I want to do this. And I was kind of surprised, because I understand why you might have the idea that I might be interested, but why do you think I might be useful? Yeah,
sure.
And the answer was pretty simple. They basically said there's so huge changes currently going on in our business, is fundamentally disrupted in many areas, and most of the time it's then about people. So we need some people also in HR that come from the business side and can have credibility, that I know where you're in. Therefore, I'm able to talk with you on ice level. Now, having been in that role, it is a real advantage.
Yeah.
Because you can talk to people differently if you say, I'm on the kind of other side now, but I know exactly how you feel currently. And this enables talks that are not as easy possible if you're really have been growing up in two different areas.
I think and I'm seeing it more and more now, by the way, people with backgrounds that have nothing to do with HR coming into it, but they're being chosen because they're leaders who can navigate change and disruption. I just want to spend a little bit more time on this. So when you jumped into the first HR role, you had no background whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
No traditional training in it. Where did you start? What did
Um,
that look like?
Obviously, the advantage is that you jump into something where people are that know how to do their business.
Okay.
So it's not that business restarts as soon as you come, but basically there are lots of people who know their business and just are now then starting being curious. Now it's a new guy coming.
Mm-hmm.
How will it change? But on the first day, nothing changed. The business just continues. What we did though is we started pretty intensely discussing what are basically the fundamental principles that we believe stay stable during this time of massive disruption. What are principles that we need to learn basically and establish because they guide us. And that was important, specifically in the first half year of the discussion and intense discussions, because as we all know, HR is disrupted in nearly every aspect that we can imagine, and you can get easily lost if you're not clear on what you believe and what you don't believe. And so there are a couple of things, and we all know them. Fundamental changes. Large companies are built on the paradigm of predictability. HR systems are in those companies are built in the paradigm of predictability. Now we see, and Siemens sees this because we are already very strong in the software business. We see so many things are unpredictable. Suddenly things need to be done completely different. Performance management, traditional performance management is based on an idea. At the beginning of the year, I can tell you, I know exactly what you're responsible for, and I can tell you what the task for the next year will be. What's the reality in business in the meantime?
It seems crazy when you put it that way now. It's so far away from that.
far away. But still, we come from there, and there was nothing wrong about it because it was more predictable, at least for companies like Siemens. But it's no longer. So we have to rethink it. Careers, very similar. We know the data that says 60% of the jobs in 5 to 10 years don't exist today. Still, we believe in traditional career planning. This is not going to work. And so we went really through nearly all of the traditional HR topics, be it career development, be it performance management, be it talent identification, all those things. Just say, do we still believe they can be done in a large-scale company like Siemens going forward, or do we need to change something? And in nearly all aspects, and we might jump into some of them later, we realized a lot of the beliefs that made us successful in the past won't work going forward, be it in performance, in career, in talent identification, in how we think about what should be the perfect leader. Yeah, all those things.
It's a lot to walk into for yourself, especially not having worked in the role. And I think each of those areas can be an entire podcast. So let's focus on one. The thing that I really want to discuss with you is what you guys called in talking about owning your career. Yeah. And so I'd love to hear more about how you're now empowering your employees to take ownership of their careers at Siemens.
Yeah. Starting into this, there are two things probably worth mentioning. One is we realized that most of the systems that we had in place to develop people's careers did not work that well, honestly. Obviously, we had things in there where we write down once a year what should be your next step and things like that. But when we quantitatively analyzed it, how often did it happen that people took this next step? We just realized we did this now for 10 years, and the success rate was close to zero. So people did different than what was expected.
Yeah.
Or what was written down. Second, we asked our people, is HR of help for you in developing your career? And many of them responded, sometimes yes, but most of the time not. Because if I've done manufacturing and I go to HR and said I want to do something else, they tell me you could probably do the next step in manufacturing, but that's not what I like. I want to explore new things. We were not happy with what we had, and was quantitatively not helpful. We were worried And then we started a journey where we basically went out in 9 countries and asked our employees, what would you need to be able to manage your career? And honestly, what would you need to really own your career? And we had complicated things in mind. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they basically said, it's pretty simple. The first thing, you guys, dear management, it would be extremely helpful if you have really full transparency on the jobs that are available at Siemens. Siemens is such a huge company.
Mm-hmm.
And we have them. And especially, it would be great if it's not only for the lower levels of the company, if you just post every job that you have openly in the company, so that I can apply if there's a job opening for the CEO job, CEO Siemens Chile, that I can apply. Then we talk to different companies and ask them, does this work? Some said, no, it doesn't. Others said, we do this for years now, it works. You have to be a little bit patient, but it works. But start top down if you do this. We decided at Siemens that we introduce for all senior management positions open job postings. So mandatory open job postings for every job below the board level. It's running now for close to 9 months. And in the meantime, we reached, I think last numbers globally was 97% of all jobs are openly posted. The ones that are not openly posted need active exemption by me, by the way, just to make sure that we ramp up quickly enough.
Sure.
It's amazing, the impact. First of all, it's very motivating for employees to see, whoa, even if I'm not taken, I have an possibility to do. What we also realized, we had lots of complicated process to make it happen, that people could do careers between different divisions. By this, you have an open job market.
You just get rid of all of that all the complicated process by doing that.
Complicated process goes away. Then you see also positive impacts, like in the US. When we started this, in the US, which is kind of the front runner for most of those things, we have now 32% of females getting into senior management positions. This is nearly doubling the amount that we had before.
Really? Wow, just by doing that.
Because it's so open and it creates a transparent environment that avoids kind of mini-me promotions or hinders mini-me promotions to some extent. Now people recognize it's actually pretty easy, and also for managers easy, because you post the job and you don't have to worry that much about succession planning, because you just get the people and then can select them. So this simplifies things. People also told us, why aren't you able to create some meaningful people profiles for us? We have on LinkedIn all of our profiles, and nothing similar within Siemens. So we talked to LinkedIn and have now the capability to automatically, with one click, get the LinkedIn profile into a pretty cool Siemens profile. But in addition, add to this whatever the people want to add to this. Specific skills that they don't want to share externally, or specific wishes, or questions, or also internal project that they worked on as kind of a reference of what they could do. Things that you won't share externally, but basically supplement their LinkedIn profiles by this at a single click. Basically, this helped, because helping them to show
they can apply for the job quicker as well. So same way that you apply for a job on LinkedIn with one click now, and it sends your profile through. Is that also part of it? In some countries, yes. Not globally yet, because this is something where you have sometimes to go through. I'm sure through specific regulations and all those things. But in some pilot countries, this is already possible. There's a lot of organizations that are doing things similar that I'm speaking to are finding now that there's a lot of these skills that they say they have a gap in already exists in parts of their organization. They just didn't know. Because absolutely. Systems weren't designed to be able to find. You can't search for a skill in their system and find these are the people with the skill set. But there's another cool thing that I mentioned before, the tagging. If I'm an employee and I see a position that I'd like to have, actually, as soon as this becomes available, I'd automatically want to be considered as an applicant. And taking it even one step further, it would be even cooler if the employees don't have the feeling that this is kind of a complicated HR process, but they can just basically click on the box and tell the manager, if you're leaving, I would be ready to follow you in terms of being really. And so we started a very small pilot, we call it job tagging,
In the meantime, the pilot completely got out of control because our employees love it. You need to imagine that you can scroll at Siemens through the whole organization, seeing the whole organizational structure with all the boxes. And what employees can do, they can just click now in this on a box, single click, and then a window pops up that you want to apply for this job as soon as it becomes available. Yes, please let the manager know that I would be interested in his or her job.
And this is regardless if they have any intention to leave that job anyway.
Exactly. It's just interest. Your job seems to be so cool that I would like to have it if you don't want it anymore. Okay. That's basically the logic.
That's pretty cool.
What we saw is also what some other companies that run them in very small scale pilots, very similar, run about 50% of the tags that you get on your box. So I also get tagged in that sense. Run about 50% are things where those people have not understood what I'm actually doing. But the other 50%, if I read their paper resumes, their profiles that they can send with it, wow, cool. I would never have thought about looking for this person over there or there. So in my case, currently, I checked it this morning. I have currently 18 valid tags on my position. So around about 9 of this 18 are people where I would immediately say, if I would have to write down a succession list, fine, I have it. Pretty amazing.
And they're people that you'd never have thought of, and they would never have been someone that would come to mind.
You suddenly realize how great people you have in a large organization if you allow them just to apply.
So how long have you been on this journey for?
It started now, so the open job market around a year ago. The tagging experiment we started run about 6 months ago. And as said, it was meant as a small scale experiment where we check user behavior, basically. Would they like it? And so in the meantime, we have run about 18,000 tags. We now need to help managers that got tagged.
That was my next question, because how do you now deal with that? Because how do you separate the people that are applying that aren't relevant at all to the people that are?
In my case, I currently have 18 valid tags, which is not an unmanageable amount of tags, obviously.
Sure.
And obviously, you do the same as whenever you get applications, you can screen them to some extent. What we see, though, we made it a very personal thing. So it's really you tag a manager. And even one thing that I didn't mention, but it follows also our principles, HR is not involved at all. So we tell our people, this is serious. This is a personal channel between you and the manager. It's not an abstract HR tool. So be responsible, because it's your personal challenge.
And they know you tag them. So yeah.
And they know you tag them. So treat it responsible. This was very, very interesting, but I think an essential, important small features in such a thing that you say, no, HR has nothing to do with it. We provide the platform. It's about you and your manager. And this automatically creates this kind of feeling of dealing responsibly with it. That's at least what we see so far.
How has HR dealt with it, taking their hands off? Because I'm sure that wasn't easy, and vice versa. And also from a manager's point of view, they're now having to be more hands-on.
This is exactly what we mean with own your career.
Yeah,
you
literally.
Own your career.
You're not waiting for HR or anyone else.
There's something between manager and you. You need to impress the manager. Obviously, the manager needs to understand what kind of talents he or she needs, because it's also the other way around. As careers become unpredictable, also managers need to become more capable of really thinking, what exactly do I need at that very moment, rather than outsourcing this process to HR and that, please give me 1 or 2 more of those standard people. That is not going to happen going forward. It helps also to drive this training.
Now you've gone through a transition of sort of owning your own career. What other tools and products do you offer the employees to help support them?
So this was kind of the trivial part in terms of making jobs visible, blah, blah, blah. What our employees also told us that, but how do I know where I'm good at? Obviously, there are different things. Discuss with your manager, discuss with your peers, and so on. But what's also clear is there are now, in the meantime, pretty good digital tools that help you to figure out where you're strong, in which environments you succeed. You use things from Gallup is called Strengths Finder, but there are also other tools out there that help our people to find out digitally their strengths. We were not sure whether they really would like it if you offer it, because it's kind of, you don't care about this. Now you give me a digital tool to find my strengths. You don't talk to me, and so on.
It may be taken that way. Yeah.
Exactly. We're not sure. So what we did was similar to the other, just do an experiment. As soon as you tag someone, there pops up the window that says, are you interested in trying to get a digital version of your strengths profile by running this test? And it took, I think, less than 4 weeks till all those licenses were gone, because people immediately said, I'm curious, I'm doing this. So we are currently in negotiation with a couple of the companies there to really provide it to our employees on a global basis, in terms of, we are not interested in HR. We don't have access to it. We will not look at it. It is only for you. If you want to do it to own your career and having this very low barrier entry towards your strengths.
So a lot of what you're doing really is removing all of the barriers that were there before from stopping people from owning their career, i.e. the job opportunities now available, the career, the skill identifier opportunity is now available. All of this before would have been handled through HR.
We try to take out HR as the middleman in this process and really take it serious and own your career, not kind of the fancy buzzword for...
Yeah, because you hear that all the time. We hear
exactly.
career all the time.
No, we mean it. We mean it. And it has drawbacks too, like we discussed in some of the area on HR. So, no, this also means that if you can't help yourself with all the help that we give you, this is already part of the, I'd call it, selection process. In the times we are moving in, if you're not able to adapt, to find new places to contribute, honestly,
you won't have a job. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is a key capability going forward. You probably won't be able to do other things.
Were there any insights from what you saw, from what people entered into that, and what came out of it?
Feedback was basically amazing how accurate those tools describe where I'm strong and weak. So this was
really great validation.
Yeah, in terms of, wow, this was really amazing and really helped me to figure out what I really want. Very few comments that people said I would have need more, because they said, with this I can talk to people, I can talk to my boss, I can talk also to peers. We were thinking people would ask much more, can I have now coaching based on this? But it was very limited. Just most of this is cooler than I ever thought what would be the outcome.
One of the things we spoke about when we was arranging this podcast is you also got rid of all of the job titles, right?
Yeah, not exactly.
Not exactly that, but you got rid of the traditional model, let's say.
All larger companies have the strict hierarchy levels.
Yeah.
Level 1, 2, blah, blah, blah. The status attached to it, money attached to it, things like that. Coming from a very Tayloristic past. Now we know that companies get much more fluidity. Now we also looked at this very similar to the careers. That are we doing the right things? We spend so much time in assigning jobs to specific levels, then questioning whether this is right. Then we have people in a level that know that they should do a job somewhere else to learn something, but the job by accident is on different level. This automatically would lead to kind of different incentives, which, by the way, we changed now too. Different car policies or whatsoever.
So many different things.
So they wouldn't move.
Yeah.
And so if you look at this system, it is really strange. You put a lot of effort to make a system that basically kills your flexibility. But we are so used to this that everyone is completely afraid of changing it.
Yeah. It's like what you said before, though. It was designed in an organization before, which was very predictable. So you could operate that way, but you can't.
That was perfectly fine. The errors that you made, this job is now wrong, then you corrected it after 2 years and it stood there for another 10. Fine.
Now you can't afford to do that now.
Exactly. And so we had the debate, should we get from 5 levels to 3 or something? And finally someone said, let's just stop it. And all people in the room were kind of, what?
What do you mean?
Stop it. If it does not add value, stop it. And then we decided for the whole company that for all senior managers, we won't have this level systems anymore. No points, no whatsoever anymore. And we thought, when we communicated to our company, we thought, wow, they will be shocked. And indeed, to some extent, they were.
I'm sure there were some people, right? You definitely get different sets of groups.
It is actually, it's not as bad as you might think, because there are more people in lower groups than on higher groups.
So they're happy.
On average, people get more happy.
Yeah, I'm sure. Makes sense.
This was easier, but then we thought, but we don't even know what will hell break loose, and every process will be destroyed. Honestly, now 2 years after we've done this, the message is nothing happened. So we kept the original contract first, so people earned the same amount of money and all those things. But whenever they changed job or did something else, they said, yeah, this is a job. It's not graded anymore. Let's talk about the money you get. Let's talk about the package. And people got used to this. And now 2 years later, we just don't have the levels anymore. We have got rid of all the struggle of people not wanting to move because of different levels.
Yeah.
There's no effort in job grading anymore. Just stopped it, and better than it was before.
And nothing fell apart like everyone was afraid. So what was one of the biggest challenges? Was it sort of how you design compensation? Because obviously that's a huge part, because that's directly linked to each of those levels. I mean, most of the time, that's what people are working towards, right?
By the way, the idea in a very traditional environment, the idea typically doesn't work that well, also in the traditional environment. Mm-hmm. There's also a significant cultural shift associated to this, because at the same time, we switched the communication to we pay market conform, and the manager is responsible.
This is an important part. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, please explain more of that, about the market conform pay as opposed to
we pay market conform. And the second part is, and the manager is the one who decides what market conform is.
That's really interesting.
It's not that you have to go to HR and ask for allowance. Am I allowed to pay that much money? And the HR guy looks into what kind of lists and said, no, you are not. For all senior management position, it's the manager who decides. He can talk to his HR business partner, obviously, said, can you give me guidance what typically people pay? Mm-hmm. So we spend quite a bit of effort in providing reference lists where you said, typically in this country, for this kind of a job, it's between that quartile percentile and that percentile. We actively tell managers, but it's your job. You pay your people. It's not HR job. And this was important to switch this at the same time to actively say, it's not about you asking HR what you're allowed to pay based on the job grade that is in there, but rather that you pay. Was important, again, something where we said, well, will immediately all packages go through the roof and people pay a lot? Is not the case.
Yeah, that would be the assumption of what people would happen.
It's the assumption, but it's not, because obviously managers realize that if they pay far too much, it hurts them on their budget side. Similar to the other one, people were thinking, it won't work, we'll do this. Just did it, and it worked.
It's a big shift of what it means to be a leader and a manager in your organization now with all of these changes as well. Did you do some training with them to help them? Because this is very new to many of them, I'm assuming, this way of working.
Honest answer, and I know that this is not the ideal one. We didn't do that. We were hoping that it would work, which it did. Mm-hmm. Honestly, it was a little stupid to hope for it, but apparently people got it pretty quickly.
It's a good sign.
Yeah. Well, a couple of other things I would say that we did something clever. This was actually stupid, but we were lucky that it worked out.
Okay, fair enough.
Thought about it was no good idea to do this without a specific training. But
yeah. So, what was the biggest challenge going through all of that? We kind of haven't touched upon those points. What were the biggest sort of challenges?
Dealing specifically within HR, dealing with the question, do we lose control? So management was pretty quickly in in understanding how this works and using it. But as HR, we were, imagine, for years,
Of course, so
we were the bad guys who said you can't pay more. Now you say we don't do this anymore. So the immediate assumption is, as soon as I'm not there, then everything gets out of control. What was the surprising thing? The simple thing, tell managers that basically you decide about the salary.
And we trust you.
We trust you. The only thing that you need probably to do is, if your boss asks you why you pay that much money to this person, you better have a good idea why you do this.
Yes.
Otherwise, you might be in trouble.
Yeah.
And this system is, while it sounds so simple, is quite effective indeed.
Of course.
Be
held accountable. So
exactly, be able to defend it, and don't defend it to me as HR. Defend it to the person who is probably interested that wages don't go through the roof, and this is you and your boss. If you both are fine, fine.
So what are you and the team doing with all this newfound time that you have?
Honestly,
well, first of all, have you found now that you do have more time to focus on more strategic tasks and other areas that perhaps you wouldn't have been able to do so? Is that an outcome of this?
In parts, definitely. What we see currently is we spend quite a bit of time really explaining the underlying principles for all this. And but this is important, because actually this is very valuable time, in a time where we switch from I plan your career, be quiet now, to you own your career. The only thing I do is lowering barriers. There's a joke already, a running joke that says future HR at Siemens is probably one third psychologists, 1/3 marketing experts, and one third user experience designers.
I don't think that's a joke. I think that is the reality. That's and more so we're moving towards that. So I agree with that.
And this is what I meant. So the traditional HR part must become much simpler, because we need to spend much more time in influencing people, in helping things to change.
Yeah,
changing behaviors, and changing behaviors is a lot about like marketing, like making tools in a way that people love to work with them and that guide them in one or the other direction.
Robert, anything else you want to jump in and throw in there to before we wrap up? I think that one of the questions I also have before we go there is, how has this changed you personally, as the way you think about HR and what it means to be a HR leader? Because everything you're talking about that you've done is about taking HR out of the equation.
No, it is unfortunately, and I have to be very careful, and also thanks for the feedback. It is, I think HR, if we don't talk about human resources, which is a word that I really dislike, because it comes from this Tayloristic idea of this is a piece I plug in and plug out, and I make it uniform to plug it in and plug it out. If you talk about human dynamics, human transformation, in a world that gets even faster, HR or this human dynamics becomes much more important. So what we need to think about is, what are the stupid things we still do that are based on a world that no longer exists, that hinder us to do exactly this?
Yeah.
And if people ask me, do you believe that HR will become less important? No.
More important, yeah.
Far more important. But get rid of all this stupid stuff that does not do anything. Be quantitative about checking whether it makes sense. If you figure out that your traditional career systems were not able to help people to drive their careers, why do you do them? You have level systems that create enormous overhead and kill flexibility, and you're able to shut them off without any harm. Why you want to do them? It is this kind of a journey but it's a journey that is very similar to the business journey. Therefore, I understand why someone would say be close to the business, because business is the same. Sales is fundamentally changing in most areas. It's getting digital. traditional things that salespeople were proud of are gone, but others come up. But we need to manage the transition. So that's the story I think we need to tell within HR. So this become much more important, but be radical on erasing things that kill you in the future.
Well, any advice you'd have for leaders about how to, present these ideas to their leaders in organizations? And some of them can sound very extreme when you first bring them up, right? And I'm sure many leaders feel the same way as you, but think about, how do I present this to my CEO or the leadership team and what that would look like? And has it been hard for you? Have you had any backlash?
Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, because I want to make sure people have the truth of this. That's why I love doing the show, because it's not all easy. It all sounds amazing what we've just talked about.
No.
But explain, it wasn't easy, right?
No.
to do.
I think one important thing that we saw is with the exception of the levelless, all those things started as pilots. I think this is there's something also the business experiences. If you have such huge changes and you discuss them theoretically without having a pilot to say, look, it's working. It's extremely hard. So always think in pilots and minimum viable products and go like this. That's the first. The second one, be radical on the principles, be very patient on the implementation. What do I mean with that? I don't know how often a week I say, no, we switch to own your career. Own your career means that the employee owns her or his career. And it means that HR is not owning this career. This is a principle. I probably tell it 100 times.
You have to keep going because it's so, yeah.
Always the same one. And don't get impatient in terms of, now I told it already 500 times. It will take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years.
You're undoing hundreds of years as the way it's always been done. That's why, right? You're going against the grain of the way it's been done for a long, long time now.
So try to be really radical on the principles. Do not compromise. Tell them exactly the same way every time. But be very, very patient that you probably need to tell them hundreds, thousands of times in different occasions. And that's probably the moments where I struggle sometimes internally. You say, I've said this now 500.
Yeah.
And you start not staying patient and accepting the time. And then you kind of be too harsh and tend to be negative. And that exactly the moments that basically throw you back by another month or two.
Yeah.
So it's really about being radical and patient at the same time.
Fantastic. Well, look, Robert, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I think we could talk about this for hours, and I'm sure you're going to get many of our listeners reaching out to you saying we want to learn more. so don't blame me after when you get a lot of messages on LinkedIn.
I'm fine with that.
Fantastic. Well, before we wrap up, we're going to jump into what we call a quick fire round, where I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
Okay, let's go.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a senior HR leader?
I was afraid that I got stuck in HR and would never be able to go back to business. I think it's not true, but that was kind of the thing that made me know.
That makes sense. Yeah. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Trust in your beliefs. Sorry, this is very high level, but it's true.
If everyone did that, so much more would get done, because that voice in your head that always talks you down and stopping you from doing it, if you can overcome that, amazing things can happen. What's some books that you'd recommend to our audience and why?
I would recommend an HR related. It's by Ashley Goodall, 9 Lies. I think it's called 9 Lies About HR or something like this, because it has a couple of pretty fundamental thoughts on where we might be right and where we might be wrong when thinking about future HR.
Fantastic. And can you share some internet resources you use personally to stay up to date with current events, whether it's sort of social media wise, news? What does that look like in terms of how you educate yourself and stay up to date?
Honestly, podcasts like this But for the rest, indeed, I use the very traditional LinkedIn, Twitter, and the like, because they point me quite effectively in various different directions, and I avoid to stay too much in a bubble. If I try to keep them pretty open in the inflow of what I see.
Fantastic. And last question, what's one thing about your current role in business that you're most excited about?
Being in a business and being in the HR that is fundamentally disrupted and requires really deep rethinking of things. And a lot of people know this, and so they are open for change currently.
Yeah, what an exciting time to working in HR, right? And in business, to be honest. Fantastic. Well, look, thank you so much for joining us. You've definitely given us a lot to think about, a lot of actionable advice, and some practical examples that we can take away and do ourselves. I really appreciate that. Before we wrap up, if there's one parting piece of guidance you could give to the listeners based on what we discussed, what would that be? And also the best way for them to get in contact with you if our listeners have any questions and they want to reach out and say hello.
HR is changing, try to shape it, and as we are on a journey, you are on a journey. Many things are not perfect while you're on a journey, but the journey is a lot of fun. Start it. I think this is the most important. The rest, if you like to contact me, please just drop me a note on LinkedIn specifically, might be the most useful one for me specifically. And beyond that, reach out if you have a question.
Fantastic. Well, Rob, thank you so much again for taking the time out to join us. For everyone listening, as always, guys, if you head over to hrdleaders.com, you'll find all of the show notes from the episode, everything that Robert's been talking about. Any links, link to Robert's LinkedIn profile will be there. Everything you need will be on there. Apart from that, Robert, thank you again for sharing your journey and experience with us. And I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Okay, thanks. Bye.